A crowbar slammed against rusted metal. The padlock didn't give. She raised it again and brought it down hard. Sparks flew. Her arms went numb. The third strike snapped the lock clean off the door. She stood there breathing hard, staring at what her family had told her never to touch. Her hand shook on the handle. She pulled. The door groaned open into darkness. Cold air rolled out. The smell of old wood and stagnant water hit her face. She stepped inside. The dock creaked beneath her boots. Water moved underneath the boards. Something down there was making a slow, hollow sound, like something trapped. Her name was Elena Reyes. She was 20 years old. 2 days ago, her family threw her out with one bag. They told her she was no longer their daughter. What she found beneath that dock changed everything. Stay with me on this one. 2 days earlier, Elena had been standing in the dining room of the only house she'd ever called home. Her mother's house. A big house. Old money. The kind of house where everyone whispered, even when nobody was visiting. Her mother sat at the head of the long table. Her stepfather Richard stood by the window. Her older brother Marcus leaned against the wall with his arms crossed. Her mother slid a single piece of paper across the table. "You will sign this," her mother said, "or you will go." Elena read the page. It had her father's name on it. A statement. A renunciation. It said her father had been a fraud. A drunk. A failure who had abandoned them. It said Elena had no claim to anything connected to him. No inheritance. No memory. No association. It said she agreed with all of it. Sign it and she stayed in the family. Refuse and she was out. Now here's the thing. Elena hadn't seen her father since she was 4 years old. She barely remembered his face. She remembered only 3 things. A hand on her head, a deep voice, and the smell of a lake at sunset. "He's dead," her mother said. "Has been for years. Sign the paper." He was nothing. Elena's hand hovered over the pen. Then she drew it back. She said one word. "No." Her mother's face changed. It went from cold to colder. Richard pushed off from the window. Marcus opened the front door without being asked. "Get out," Richard said. Elena packed a single duffel bag. Some clothes, a toothbrush, an old book. She walked past her mother without looking. She walked past Marcus without speaking. She stepped onto the front porch and the door closed behind her. She didn't have a car. She didn't have a job. She didn't have any savings worth counting. They had controlled all of that. Her phone was on her mother's plan. By the time she reached the end of the driveway, it had been canceled. Elena walked to the bus stop in the rain. She slept on her friend Mara's couch for 2 nights. Mara was kind. Mara had her own problems. 2 nights was the limit, even Elena could feel it. The morning of the 3rd day, Elena sat at Mara's kitchen table with a coffee in her hands. She had $83 in cash. She had no plan. She didn't know what to do. That's when the memory came back. The boathouse. Her father had kept a boathouse on Lake Hadley, 3 hours north. She'd been there once, maybe twice. She had been very small. She remembered the wooden dock. She remembered water moving under boards. She remembered her father saying something to her. Something specific. Something she had half buried under 20 years of being told to forget him. He had said, "If you ever need anything, you come here. You hear me, baby? You come to the boathouse. Look under the 3rd board. You promise me." She had been 4. She had promised. She hadn't thought about that day in years. Maybe ever. Now Elena had no idea if the boathouse still existed. Her mother had told her years ago that the place had been condemned, sold off, bulldozed. But her mother had told her many things. Elena went into Mara's spare room. In the bottom of her duffel bag, wrapped in an old wool sock, was the only thing she'd kept from her father. A small brass keychain with 3 keys on it. Her grandmother had pressed it into her hand once, when nobody was watching, and told her to hide it well. Elena had been 12 at the time. Her grandmother had died a month later. She had never used the keys. She didn't even know what they opened. But one of them was big and rusted, with a number stamped into the head. A number that matched the address she remembered from a letter. A letter her mother had thrown out years ago. A letter Elena had read once and somehow memorized. Lake Hadley, Boathouse 47. She borrowed Mara's car. She said she'd be back by nightfall. She drove 3 hours north. The road got narrower. The trees got thicker. The pavement gave way to gravel. She passed a sign that read Lake Hadley for miles. She passed nothing after that for a long time. When she found the lake, she found it half empty. The summer crowd was gone. The water was gray. The dock numbers ran down the shore in faded white paint. 45, 46, and there it was, 47. The boathouse was small, dark wood, peaked roof, a wide door facing the water. The lock was old and rusted shut. Around the door, the boards were warped from years of rain and snow. She tried the keys. None of them turned. The lock was too far gone. So she went back to Mara's car. She found a crowbar in the trunk under a tarp. She walked back to the boathouse. She raised the crowbar. She brought it down on the lock. That's where you came in. Elena stepped inside. The air hit her first. Damp wood, cold water, old kerosene. Nothing alive had been in here in a long time. The boathouse was small, maybe 20 feet by 30. Most of the floor was a wooden dock, wide planked, running down to the water on the open side. A small inlet of the lake came in under the dock. To the left, a workbench piled with old fishing tackle. To the right, a narrow cot covered in a gray wool blanket. A pair of work boots beside the cot. A coat hanging on a hook. A kerosene lamp. A coffee can full of bent nails. Everything was still, like he had just stepped out for a minute. Elena walked through it slowly. She touched the coat. The wool was stiff with age. She picked up the boots. Size 11. Hers were size 7. She opened a small cabinet over the workbench. Inside, a tin of pipe tobacco dried out. Coffee mug. Pencil. A small framed photograph turned face down. She picked it up. It was her. As a baby, maybe a year old, sitting on her father's shoulders. He was smiling. She was laughing. Her mother stood beside them. Her mother was smiling too. Elena had never seen that picture before. She set it down very carefully. She did not trust her hands. She kept searching. She opened drawers, lifted tarps, looked under the cot, checked behind the workbench. 20 minutes passed. 30. Nothing else. Just a man's old fishing things. The leftovers of a life lived alone. She nearly left. She stood by the door with the crowbar in her hand and thought, I came all this way for a coat and a coffee mug. I'm an idiot. There's nothing here. Then she turned around. She looked at the dock floor. The third board. He had said, look under the third board. She had assumed it was a metaphor. A children's game. Something a parent says to a 4-year-old to make a moment feel special. She counted from the door. 1, 2, 3. The third board was wider than the others. Older. Darker. The nails were different. Flat-headed. Hand-driven. Set deeper than the rest. She knelt down. She tried to lift it with her fingers. It didn't move. She slid the crowbar under the edge. She pulled. The wood groaned. The nails screamed. The board came up about an inch. She worked the crowbar along its length, popping each nail. After a few minutes, the whole board came free. Underneath, water. Black water. The lake had gotten in over the years. She stuck her hand in. The cold went up her arm to the shoulder. Nothing. Just water. She felt around. Just slimy wood. Just stone. Just nothing. She sat back on her heels. She wanted to laugh. She wanted to cry. She did neither. Then she noticed something. The water under the third board did not move like the rest of the lake. It was still. Enclosed. There was a barrier under there. A wall of some kind. A box, maybe. The lake water that had seeped in was sitting on top of something. She lay down flat on the dock. She reached deeper. Her arm went in past the elbow, past the shoulder. Her cheek pressed against the wet board. Her fingers found metal. A handle. A latch. Something heavy. She pulled. Nothing moved. She tried again, both arms now, her whole weight pressed into it. Her shoulders ached. The metal scraped against something. A second latch held it down. She fumbled the crowbar in with her right hand and worked it free. A sucking sound. Then it came up. She dragged it onto the dock. Water poured off it. A black metal trunk, about the size of a small suitcase, sealed all around the seams with hardened wax. Padlocked. She sat back on her heels, breathing hard. Her arms shook from the cold. Her hands were bleeding where she'd scraped them on the metal edges. She looked at the trunk. She did not open it. Not yet. Her hand went to the keychain in her pocket. She took it out. The smallest key was thin and brass. She tried it on the padlock. It slid in. Turned. The lock clicked open. She did not lift the lid. Instead, she stood up. She walked back outside. She sat on the edge of the dock and let her legs hang over the water. The sun was dropping. The lake had gone dark blue at the edges. The sky was pink. Somewhere in the reeds, a frog started up. Then another. She thought about her mother, about Marcus, about Richard's hard face, about being put on the curb with a duffel bag like trash, about $83 in cash and no plan. She thought about her father, about the photograph she had just seen, him smiling, her mother smiling, all three of them together in a moment Elena had no memory of. She thought, maybe there's nothing in this trunk that matters. Maybe it's old fishing gear. Maybe it's love letters to a woman I never met. Maybe it's just paper. I came this far. I broke in. I found something. I should be excited. But she wasn't. She was just tired. She was so tired she could have slept right there on the dock. The water moved underneath her, slow and dark, quiet, calm. She sat there for a long time. The sun went all the way down. The frogs got louder. A night bird called once across the water. Elena stood up. She wiped her hands on her jeans. She walked back inside. She lit the kerosene lamp on the workbench. She knelt in front of the trunk. And she lifted the lid. Inside the trunk was waxed paper. Yellow with age. Layered. Carefully folded. She lifted the first layer. Photographs. A stack of them, held together with a brittle rubber band. She turned them over one at a time. Her as a baby. Her as a toddler. Her father holding her. Her father feeding her. Her father teaching her to walk. In every one of them he was smiling. In every one of them she was laughing. There were dozens. Photographs Elena had never seen in her life. Photographs that had been hidden from her for 20 years. Her hand went to her mouth. She set them aside. She lifted the next layer. A leather-bound book. Brown. Soft from handling. She opened it. Her father's handwriting filled the pages. Dated entries. The first one was from 24 years ago, a month after she was born. The last one was from 8 years ago. She turned to the last entry. She read it once. Then she read it again. It said, "My daughter Elena turns 12 today. Her grandmother told me she gave her the keys. So Elena has them. Susan won't let me speak to her. Won't let me write to her. Won't acknowledge a single letter I send. Tells everyone I'm dead. By the time Elena reads this, maybe I will be. But what's hers is here. Everything I built is hers. Not theirs. Never theirs. She'll come when she needs it. She always was the smart one. Wait for her old box. Wait under the dock. She'll come." Elena read it a fourth time. Then she set the journal down on the dock and put her hands flat against her knees because she was shaking. He had not abandoned her. He had tried to reach her. For years. Her mother had blocked him. She sat there with the lake water dripping off her sleeves and she let herself cry. Not loudly. Quietly. The way you cry when you've been told one story for 20 years and the truth has just walked into the room. If you've made it this far with me, do me one favor. Hit that subscribe button. This story is about to get a whole lot bigger, and I want you here when it does. She wiped her face. She kept going. The next layer in the trunk was a leather portfolio. She opened it. A bank book. The most recent entry was from 8 years ago. The account number was written in her father's tight, neat hand. The most recent balance line read $487,300. And some change. Elena stared at the number. She read it 3 times to make sure. $487,300. She set the bank book down. Her hands were not behaving the way she wanted them to. The next document was thicker. Folder. Inside a trust agreement. 12 pages. The grantor was named at the top. Daniel Reyes. Her father's full name. The beneficiary was named at the bottom. Elena Maria Reyes. Her name. The trustee was a law firm in Boston. The trust had been set up 16 years ago. She had been 4 years old. The trust held the bank account. It held 2 pieces of property. A deed to this exact boathouse, and 40 acres of waterfront around it. The deed was in her name, not her mother's, not her stepfather's, hers. A second deed. A property on Main Street in the town she was born in. A small building. A bookshop, the document said, with an apartment above it. Also in her name. A third document. A copy of her father's last will and testament. Filed and notarized in the county courthouse. It named her, and only her, as sole beneficiary of every asset her father owned. The will was dated 16 years ago, when she had been 4 years old, when her mother had told her, only a year later, that her father was dead and gone and worthless and best forgotten. Elena pressed her palms hard against her eyes. She had been told her whole life that her father was a failure, a drunk, a man who left them, who had nothing, who was nothing. The man she had been told about did not exist. The man who existed had built a business, had built a life, had set every single thing he owned aside for her, 16 years before she could find it, had been forced out of her life, had been told he could never see her, had written her letters her mother had thrown away, had waited, and now he was dead, and she was sitting on the floor of his boathouse, surrounded by everything he had left her. There was one more thing in the trunk. Beneath the documents, beneath the journal, beneath the photographs was an envelope. Heavy paper, sealed in red wax, addressed in her father's handwriting. To Elena, when she is old enough to find this. She picked it up. She held it in both hands. She did not open it. Not yet. She put the envelope into the inside pocket of her coat. She stood up. She stacked the documents back into the portfolio. She closed the trunk. She locked it. The lake outside was dark now. The frogs had stopped. The wind had picked up. Somewhere far across the water, a single light burned in another boathouse window. Elena loaded the trunk into the back of Mara's car. She locked the boathouse with the second key from the keychain. The big rusted one. She turned, and to her surprise, the lock turned with it. After all these years, she got behind the wheel. She started the engine. She drove south. She drove all night. She wasn't going back to Mara's couch. She was going home. The sun was just coming up when she pulled into the driveway of her mother's house. The big house. The old money house. The house where everyone whispered. Elena had not slept. Her hands were still scabbed from the dock. Her clothes were still damp around the cuffs. She had the trust agreement, the deeds, the will, the journal, and the photographs in a leather satchel on the passenger seat. She had the envelope in her coat pocket, still unopened. She rang the doorbell at 6:15. Richard answered. He was in a robe. He looked at her and he looked at her clothes and he looked at her face. He said, "You can't be here." Elena said, "Get my mother. Get Marcus. Now." Something in her voice made him do it. They came down. Her mother, Marcus, Richard behind them, her mother in a silk robe, Marcus in pajama pants and a t-shirt. They stood in the front hall like a small army of people who had been pulled out of bed. Elena walked past them into the dining room. She set the leather satchel on the table. She opened it. She laid the documents out one by one. The trust, the deeds, the will, the bank book, the journal. The photographs. She laid them out the way her mother had laid that single piece of paper in front of her 3 days earlier. Then she stepped back. She crossed her arms. She said, "Read." Her mother did not move. Marcus picked up the trust first. He read the front page. His face changed. He reached for the will. His face changed again. He sat down without being asked. Richard read over Marcus's shoulder. His mouth opened. It stayed open. Her mother stood very still. Elena said, "You told me he was dead when I was 5. According to that journal, he was alive until 8 years ago. That's 12 years you told me a man was dead when he wasn't. That's 12 years he wrote me letters I never got. That's 12 years you blocked him from a child who would have given anything to see him." Her mother said, "Elena." Elena said, "I'm not finished." Her mother stopped talking. Elena said, "You told me he was a failure. He had $487,000 in a trust account in my name. You told me he had nothing. He had a property on Main Street. He had this boathouse on Lake Hadley. He had 40 acres of waterfront. All of it in my name, from when I was 4 years old." Her mother said, "You don't understand." Elena said, "I understand fine." She picked up the journal. She opened it to a marked page. She read out loud, "September. Susan returned my letter unopened again." The envelope was marked, by her hand. "Return to sender. Recipient deceased." She closed the journal. She said, "You wrote that on a letter from my father. You wrote that he was dead. He wasn't. You returned it that way so the post office would stop delivering them. You did that to a man who was trying to reach his daughter." Her mother's hand was shaking. Marcus said, very quietly, "Mom." Her mother did not answer him. Richard tried. He said, "Elena, your father was not the man you think he was. There were reasons." Elena said, "There were reasons you wanted his money. There were reasons you wanted me under your roof and under your control until I was old enough to be married off the way you wanted. There were reasons you needed me to sign that paper 3 days ago. Because you knew. You knew this trunk was somewhere. You knew there was an inheritance. You needed me to renounce it before I found it." Richard sat down. Her mother said, "It's complicated." Elena said, "It's not complicated. You wanted his money. He didn't give it to you. He gave it to me. You spent 20 years trying to make sure I would never want it. The minute I refused to renounce him, you put me on the curb. Because you knew." Her mother said, "Elena, please." Elena said, "I have a lawyer. The trust will be transferred into my name within 30 days. The deeds are already mine. The bank account is already mine. I am not pressing charges. I am not asking for restitution. I am not asking for an apology, because I know better than to expect one from any of you." She picked up the documents. She put them back in the satchel. She said, "I'm telling you this because I want you to know that I know, and so that when you tell people I'm the difficult daughter who walked away, and you will tell them, you'll know it isn't true. You'll know what you did, and you'll know that I know." Marcus stood up. He took a step toward her. He said, "Elena, I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know." Elena looked at him. He had been 10 years older than her, the brother who had opened the door. She said, "You opened that door for me 3 days ago. You didn't have to." She did not say it cruelly. She just said it. Marcus's eyes filled up. He did not argue. He did not defend himself. He just nodded. Elena turned. She walked through the front hall. She walked out onto the porch. She closed the door behind her. Behind her, in the dining room, nobody moved. She got in the car. She drove north. A year later, the boathouse on Lake Hadley had a new roof, new windows, a new wood stove. The old cot was gone. A real bed had taken its place. A simple one, white sheets, a wool blanket folded at the foot. Elena had built bookshelves along one wall. She had set up a small desk under the window. Her father's leather-bound journal sat open on the desk, weighted by a stone. The third board had been replaced. She had done it herself. She had taken it to a craftsman in town. He had cut a new piece of polished oak the same size and the same width. He had inlaid a small brass plaque in the center. The plaque had two things on it: her father's birthday, and her name. Just hers and his. Nothing else. She walked over the third board 10 times a day. Sometimes more. The trunk sat on a shelf above the bed now. Cleaned. Polished. The padlock hung open from the latch. The crowbar from that first night was mounted on the wall beside it. She had never moved it. It belonged there. In town, on Main Street, the bookshop her father had owned was open again. Elena had cleaned it up over 6 months. Repainted. Restocked. Added a small cafe in the back where the storage room used to be. Mara had moved up from the city to run it. Mara made coffee. Elena ordered the books. Together they had built something small and good. The bookshop had a name. Elena had named it. The third board. It was a strange name. People asked. Elena always smiled and said, "Family thing." She had a routine now. Mornings at the bookshop. Afternoons on the lake. Evenings at the boathouse. She read. She wrote. She watched the water. She thought about her father. She had read the letter from the trunk 100 times. She kept it in a frame on the desk now. She had cracked the wax seal 1 week after she came back from her mother's house. She had been ready by then. The letter had been short. It said, "Elena, if you're reading this, then you found it. I knew you would. You always were the smart one. I'm sorry I couldn't be there. I'm sorry your mother won and I lost. I'm sorry you had to grow up without me. But what I built for you. The bookshop, the boathouse, the trust. None of it was for me. It was for the day they finally cut you off the way they cut me off. I knew they would eventually. Susan does that. She wins until the moment she loses, and then she loses everything. I waited for you under the dock as long as I could. Be free, baby. You always were the smart one. Dad." Elena had read it on the dock. She had read it the way you read a letter from a man who cannot be answered. Now here's the thing. Believe me when I tell you this. The man Elena had been told about for 20 years had not existed. The man who had existed had loved her, had fought for her, had built a life and laid it at her feet, and had waited under a dock for 16 years for her to find him. She did not get him back. He was gone. But she got everything else. She got her name back. Her own name, not her mother's, not her family's. Reyes, her father's name. She used it now. She had it printed on the bookshop sign. She got her work back. Honest work. Her own. She got her quiet back. The quiet that comes from not pretending anymore. She got her freedom back. The kind of freedom that nobody can take from you because no one gave it to you in the first place. Marcus came up to the lake once 6 months in. He drove 3 hours and stood on the dock with his hands in his pockets. He said he was sorry. He said he had not known. He said he believed her now. He said their mother had spent the last 6 months telling everyone Elena had stolen the inheritance, and that nobody believed her anymore. Elena listened. She made him a cup of coffee. They sat on the dock and watched the water for a long time. She did not say much. She did not need to. When he left, she walked him to his car. He hugged her. She let him. He said, "I love you, kid." She said, "I love you too." He drove away. She had not seen her mother. She did not plan to. She did not plan to forgive her either. Some things are not for forgiving. Some things are for walking away from. Her father had walked away. Now she had too. She understood him better for it. That night, she sat on the dock with her legs hanging over the water. The sun went down the way it always did. The frogs started up in the reeds. A night bird called once across the lake. She put her hand flat on the third board. She said, out loud, very quietly, "Thank you, Dad." The water moved underneath her, slow and dark, quiet, calm. She sat there a long time. Then she stood up. She walked back into the boathouse. She blew out the kerosene lamp. She closed the door. She did not lock it. She did not need to anymore.